Okay, we're on lesson 6.
Yes.
Roman numeral page 28 in the AA book. Okay, it starts out at the bottom of the page. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stage of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. That's a powerful paragraph, and it has a lot of vital information in there that we need to take heed to. There's a famous saying, I haven't heard it in some time, but it kind of like came to my mind. They say for the first 90 days, you've got to do what?
90 minutes and 90 days.
Okay, and then there's another saying also. First 90 days, you're supposed to, I'll give you a clue. It has something to do with cotton.
Take the cotton out of your mouth and stuff in your... No, take cotton out of your ears and stuff in your mouth.
Correct. So that means we really got to pay attention and soak in information, because it's by doing that that we can begin that psychic change in our life. If we don't get our mind entirely changed, then there's going to be some things there that's going to draw us back into that life. So, number 1, it says they like the effect produced by alcohol. We're not essentially addicted to drugs or alcohol. You got to fully understand that. Even though people say it's an addiction, what we're actually addicted to is the feeling.
Yes, sir.
You got to look at it that way. I am addicted to the feeling. So anything that produces a similar feeling, I can substitute one feeling for the other. Stimulant users, when they give up their stimulant drug, will cross over to another stimulant activity or drug. The number 1 relapse for stimulant users is sex. And it's the sex that drives them back. Once they get into that elusiveness and into that mindset, and they can no longer have sex, but they're in that mindset, they'll pick up their drug. So if it's not sex, then it's some other kind of stimulating activity or substance. So there's no real recovery. It's just substituting various types of feelings, and there's no real change whatsoever. But they can lay claim to saying that they got 2 months clean, 3 months clean, 4 months clean. But in essence, that is not true, because they've never reached sobriety. Sobriety can't be reached until there's a complete psychic change. So it says that the sensation is so elusive. Let's put sex in this spot here. I'm going to read it. I'm going to change the word alcohol or alcoholic life to sex life and sex. Men and women have sex essentially because they like the effect produced by having sex. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, a sex life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they again experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by having a relationship. Sex which they see others doing with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to have sex again. This is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's little hope of his recovery. You know, you can put anything there that produces that feeling and read it in a totally different light. Okay, where the word person is, you're supposed to circle that, right? And replace it with the word I. So this is repeated over and over. Unless I can experience an entire psychic change, there's little hope of my recovery. So that's taking it very personal. How do you get an entire psychic change?
God.
What are some of the steps you got to take?
Read the Bible. Letting your old self die.
So you got to keep in mind that you're in a partnership with God.
Pray regularly.
So yes, God has to do some things, but we also have to do some things. If we don't take steps to do our part, then the psychic change will not take place. It's not entirely God's responsibility. We're partners. There's also things I need to do in support of what He wants done in my life. If I refuse to do what I need to do, then God's not going to be able to do what He needs to do. Okay, I'm going to give you a prescription. If you come to the doctor's office and you have a major illness, the doctor's going to give a diagnosis, then he's going to give you a prescription, and he's going to tell you how to take the prescription in order to get better. I'm going to show you God's prescription. James, book of James, chapter 4. This information is very important to understand and get. And this is, if you do not start writing down in the margin of your Bible, you will forget 99.9% of everything you've ever heard. You'll never remember it again.
It's not true.
It's true for the most part. That much of what you learned, what was the sermon about? Tell me the details.
Which sermon?
2 weeks ago.
Where?
Or a month ago. Let's say a month ago. What was the sermon about? What was the title? A month ago.
I don't know.
The first Sunday in October. What was the title of the sermon? I just want to know the title. We lose and we forget much of what is told us if we don't write it down. Peter said, keep in memory what I have told you. In order to keep in memory, that means you got to rehearse it. You got to have it written down. I got 2 volumes of books in my office where I've sat down and I've taken sermons and I've written them down so that I can read the sermon. Just about every book I've ever read in my lifetime, I've taken the book, read it, highlighted the specific sentences that are transformational for me, typed them back up, and put them on paper. I got everything I've ever read for years in my office. I can show it to you. I can go back into that little book, and everything's categorized. At the beginning, it'll list every book. It'll list many sermons by topic. And I can go in there, and I can pull anyone up and remember and rehearse and study those things that had an effect on me at the time that I heard it. I've been doing it that way for years. That's how I try to produce an entire psychic change in my life. If we were just living on a whim and we don't have a deliberate plan on trying to produce an entire psychic change, then we are doing what James says. We are being a hearer only and not a doer of the word. So it's very important that we have a way to rehearse and remember the important things in life. That's why, one of the reasons why I have you writing in the margin of the A book and underlining things. Okay, James chapter 4. This is a prescription. If we do not take God's prescription, we're going to greatly be affected in a negative way. This prescription in James chapter 4 goes entirely against the flesh. The flesh does not want to do this drug. The flesh does not want this to be ingested because it causes a cure, and the flesh does not want to be cured. But it's something that we have to learn to try to make ourselves do it. We have to get into the mindset of this attitude. I'm going to start reading in verse 1, James chapter 1. From where comes wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even of your lusts that war in your members? You lust and have not, you kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. You fight in war, yet you have not because you ask not. You ask and receive not because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lusts. Okay, now I'm going to explain something out in the that goes rather deep. It can be rather even shocking, but it's where things really hit home. We can be desensitized from it, or we can allow ourselves to be sensitive enough to say, wow, I'm so sorry, God, for what I've been doing. This is what he says. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do ye think that the scripture saith in vain, the spirit that dwells in us lusteth to envy? Okay. Here you are, you have a great illness. It is so great that it sends you to the ER. And you come walking into the ER, and they do a diagnosis. They do a diagnosis. This is God's diagnosis. After taking a look at our life, he's sitting back, and you're sitting across at the table in the ER, and God, the great physician, comes walking in. And he takes a look. He says, you know, my son, as soon as I walked into this room, I could tell what your problem is, without actually even checking things out. And it says here, adulterers and adulteresses. This is referring to spiritual adultery. Have you ever been hurt by a girl that you were in love with?
Yes.
have you experienced the pain of that? If you have, raise your hand. I just want to see how many. So the great majority have felt that utter pain where maybe perhaps you don't want to live anymore. I've been in those situations where life's not worth living without this person. They hurt me. There was a time I had been hurt so many times early on trying to recover that I almost started getting used to it, being hurt by women. There was a time, this one girl, I was deeply in, I would say in love, but it was probably infatuated with her, with the sexual part with her. Very attractive looking, very sexual, and she was able to rock my world. So I was just wanting to hold on to that drug. We had broken up, but we were still kind of friends. And occasionally, once in a great while, we'd have sex. I went to take her out for lunch where her job was. We went out for lunch. On the way back, she said, "Don't take me back to my job. Keep driving straight. We're going down the road." She said, "Don't turn. Keep going." And we're driving, and suddenly she's on the phone. And she says, yes, I'm going to tell him. I said, "What? Who are you talking to?" She said, "I'm talking to my daughter." I said, "Who are you going to tell?" What you're talking about? You got something to tell me?" She said, yes. There's a guy I've been saying he's at my job, and that's why we couldn't go back there, because I don't want you and him to get into it. She said, "Keep driving." And while I was driving, she called him. We ended up a mile or two down the road and pulled into a shopping center. And she said to me, "The guy's coming down to the shopping center." And I'm thinking, I wonder what's going to happen with this mess. So we're sitting in the car, and he pulls up. It's the first time I've seen this guy. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat. He gets in the back seat of the car. They get to talking. And, I maintain my composure. And they get to arguing. And she was a very abusive person. That's why I decided to get away from her as much as possible. And they got to talking, and she swung around to slap him in the face. And I had gotten slapped a couple times myself when I was dating her. And, I grabbed her arm, and now I felt sympathetic toward him. I said, "Don't hit him." I said, "You know what? You can have her." I said, "She's your problem." Yeah. And it just reminded me of the abuse and how things can be. So I know what it feels like to be betrayed and hurt. It's not the first time that happened to me. It happened to me when I first met my first love. I got very hurt that time, and I've told you about that story. So I have plenty of experience being hurt in those situations, so I know what it feels like. And God has emotion, intellect, and will. He feels. He expresses his feelings throughout the Bible. It says, "Grieve not the Spirit of God." So he can be grieved. God can be hurt and grieved. He has feelings. He has emotions. So it says, he tries to relate to what he feels by using these terminologies, adulterers, adulteresses. He said, "If you're friends with the world, you're at enmity with me." He sees that as two-timing. You're friends with the world. with worldly things. Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world, that means that you got one foot with God and one foot you're still trying to do still trying to live that other life. It says that you're an enemy of God. That don't sound too pleasurable. That the person that redeemed you and saved you is feeling that kind of emotion over our lack of commitment. Then it says, do you think that the scripture says in vain, the spirit that dwells in us lusteth to envy? Now people have interpreted it this various ways, but after thorough investigation, I am 100% convinced that verse 5 means this, that the Spirit of God loves you so much, it's almost to the point of envy. I can't imagine God, who created the entire universe, as majestic as He is, that He would lower Himself, humble Himself, and take on the form of man, live in a sin-cursed world, be abused and beaten and marred more than any man, and crucified for me. I can't imagine. I couldn't get myself to do that for anybody, no matter how much I thought I loved them. I don't think I could do it. It would be a hard price to pay. I can't imagine that. I can't fathom that kind of love, that He would love me like that. I can't. After all these years, I just can't grasp how much God really loves us. No wonder He loves us so much. It's almost to the point of envy. He just wants us for Himself. He don't want part of us. He wants all of us. He wants everything we got to give back to Him. Now, the question is, what is the prescription to cure this illness? Many of us in this room, we still have this illness. Many of us are struggling with difficulties and things that are pulling us away from God. What is the cure? What is the prescription, doctor? You've given me the diagnosis. You've showed me my illness. Now, what do I need to do, God, to get rid of it? I don't want this in my life. What is it that I need to do? Okay, prescription number 1. He says, but He gives more grace. Okay, prescription number 1, I'm going to give you some help. I'm going to write you out a prescription. I'm going to give you grace. That's my prescription. Okay, take this prescription and I want you to fill it. Jesus, the doctor, is saying, I'm going to give you my grace. That's my prescription pad. Now, I want you to take this prescription and I want you to go and act on it. You know, many times we take a prescription and we don't go and fill it. We'll go through all the bottle to go to a doctor. He writes out the prescription. We come home and we lay it up on a counter someplace, and we never do get better. Because for some reason we just don't want to follow through and fill the prescription. Okay, this is the prescription. It says, God resists the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Okay, pride. Okay, God, you're going to be against me if I'm prideful, stubborn, and unwilling. But it says He gives grace to the humble. Okay, prescription number 1, humble yourself. Be willing to humble yourself. That goes against the flesh. The flesh does not want to be humble, doesn't want to be submissive. Humble yourself. Prescription number 2, submit yourself, therefore, to God. What does it mean to submit? If you're in a fight with somebody and they're fighting, someone's going to have to win, right? If I grab that person's index finger and I bend it backwards, they would fall to their knees, right? It probably wouldn't matter how big they were. If I bend it hard enough, they're going down, right? Unless they're on some kind of drug or something, they don't feel the pain. But if you bend that finger back hard enough, they're going down. That's called submission. You know, if you wrestle, you got to get someone in a submissive hold in order to win. It says, submit yourself to God. You know, that's one thing oftentimes we don't want to do is submit to God. Okay, after we submit to God, the next prescription is resist. Resist what? Resist the devil. Submit, resist. You know what we do? We get it backwards. We struggle trying to resist and resist and resist. But we've forgotten the first prescription, which is submit to God. And we wonder why we're having so much trouble. We're fighting this battle. We're fighting the devil. But we forgot that that's not going to work real well until you submit to God. You submit to God, then you fight the devil. Submit, resist, draw near. Verse 8, draw near. So submit, resist, and draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Next one, cleanse your hands. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Next prescription, be afflicted, mourn, and weep. When was the last time that occurred? Has it ever occurred? Afflicted, mourn, and weep. After I got saved, the first year I did well. I was naive, didn't really realize. I was somewhat sheltered up to this point. I did not realize what the real world really was like. I stayed at my parents' house. I was at my parents' house when I got saved. I was partially sheltered. Then I left, and I went out into the real world. It took me a year, and I went into a severe relapse. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't prepared. I was naive. I was stupid. I was ignorant. There was a lot of things I just didn't know. And so through a series of events, I relapsed. It was very severe experience. But afterwards, I laid flat out on the ground, just like how David experienced his cry out to God. And I was asking God, please help me. Please help me to get back. And like it says, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. It took me like 6 months of trying to draw near to God. It was a bad experience. It took me a hard road to get back. It was so hard I thought, I can't allow myself to do this ever again. The fact that it's this hard to get back in tune with God and get a good life again, I can't allow this to happen again. From that day forward, I never took one drink, never took one drug, none. I never drank Abdul's, I never drank a wine cooler. Anything I get from the doctor, I'm squeamish about. I'm extremely careful. It left such a bad taste in my mouth in my life. It was such a bad experience. I learned something from it. I've been around people taking drugs in front of me. I've found drugs laying on the streets. It didn't bother me. I drew the line after that no matter what happens in my life, no matter what girl might pop up in my life and I find out she has a drug problem, no matter what occurs from this day forward, I will not allow myself to go through that pain and suffering again. And I still had a lot of addictive behavior and things I had to work on. But I'll tell you, that day I drew the line. I learned my lesson. And I didn't want to go in that direction again. I drew near to God, I cleansed my hands of that, and I purified my heart, just like it says here. It says, be afflicted and mourn and weep. Man, I wept and cried over my waywardness. I just wanted that peace. I wanted that joy. Man, I was so excited about my salvation. I felt like I was walking on a cloud. I remember that week when I got saved. I was like, wow, I'm cleansed from all my sin, man. I'm just as pure as a baby. I'm clean. I'm right. It was a good feeling. That was one feeling, since we're not addicted to the drugs and alcohol, that was one feeling that I treasured. I thought, wow, what a drug. What an experience to know that I have a relationship with God that will never go away. To be forgiven. To be right with my Creator. That experience and that intimacy with God, I never wanted to diminish that. And when it occurred a year later, and it occurred slowly, it didn't just happen like one day. It occurred by little compromises and ignorance of events, a series of events, and then before you know it, I was back into it. But at some point, God disciplines you. And God sure disciplined me. He brought me to my knees where I wept, mourned, and was afflicted. If I could have threw up dust and ashes, I would have done that. I would have done anything to say, God, look at me, man. I got to get things right. If I knew how to put sackcloth on, I would have done that. Whatever I had to do, I was crying out for God to help me to get things back, and that took such a long time. God's been good to me over the years. God has forgiven me of much. He has tolerated much. I tell you guys to take 1 John 1:9 and memorize it. I say it's your lifeline. Why do I say that? Because it's been my lifeline. And we're all in the same boat. We all have struggles. It's just that I've been further along in trying to work on things. So I have something to offer back to you guys. I'm telling you, 1 John 1:9, if I confess my sins, God is faithful. Thank God for that. God is faithful. And He's just to forgive me my sins and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness. When I'm guilty of breaking God's laws, I need to confess that. There's no chapter division between those verses and chapter 2 of 1 John. The continued thought, but if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And He is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. I have an advocate. Thank God I got a lawyer. Have you ever been in trouble before? I mean some serious trouble. And you had to go before the judge. Judges scare me. Even to this day, judges make me nervous. When I got to go before a judge and you got to say, yes, sir, or yes, Your Honor. Just the fact that I got to say that makes me nervous. Like, yes, Your Honor. All rise. I'm like, oh, that makes me nervous. The moment they say all rise, from that point on, I'm done. I am so nervous in the courtroom. All rise. I'm like, ugh. I'm already nervous. Okay, Rick Briggs up to the front to face the judge. I'm like, oh man, I'm so nervous. Yes, Your Honor. Well, I got an advocate. Thank God I got an advocate. I don't have to go through all that stress. Why? Because I got a lawyer that's going to do it for me. And the lawyer I got is so good, he's never lost a case, so I don't have to sit back and worry, like, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder if I'm going to lose today. And be biting my nails worrying about it. No, because I know this lawyer I've got already saved my life. And I know he's quite capable of winning every case. It says, if any man sin, he has a lawyer. Sin The crime is death. Wages of sin is death. But my lawyer somehow can take that death sentence and turn it around and give me life, peace, joy, and forgiveness. But he goes before the Father. The Father and he pleads my case. And all because I got a good lawyer, the Father says, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Remove his sins as far as the east is from the west. I'll remember them no more. That sin will never come before this court again. And then my lawyer walks back to the table and he sits down and he whispers to me and he says, you're forgiven. And I think, wow, it took all this to forgive me of that one sin. A couple of weeks go by and you find yourself knocking back, walking down the street, and you're knocking on your lawyer's door again. This time he calls you by name. Oh, Rick, you're my client. Yeah, I remember you from a couple weeks ago. Come on in. What's going on? Well, I did it again. You know the sin. You know the law I broke a couple of weeks ago. I fell again. Well, we got a court hearing set up for this one also. So let's meet me back in my office here, and we'll get this thing cleared up. And so we go through that process. You know how many times I've gone through that process? I'm 57 years old. I'll be 58 in January. I've gone through that process so many times. I've never been afraid to go to my lawyer. I've never said, you know what, I've messed up so many times. Lawyer, I can't keep coming back to you. I've never said that. The lawyer has never lost a case. And I'll tell you, I use him every week. Every week for 57 years, I've been using my lawyer. He knows me well. He knows how I think. He knows how I act. He knows all my weaknesses. By now, he knows everything. He knows my weak links. He knows how I struggle. But I'm in communication with my lawyer constantly. Every day, I at least talk to him by phone. And I'm talking to him all the time. I don't need to hide nothing from my lawyer because he already knows everything about me. So I talk to him. And when I find myself falling short, I say, I need your help. And it says that he's the propitiation. He's the advocate. He's the lawyer, and he's never going to lose a case. One day, my lawyer's going to have me sitting in heaven with a new body and a new life that will never sin again. That's my great hope, is that one day I'll overcome. All because I got a good lawyer.
Who's your lawyer? I need to hire him.
Some people don't have that kind of lawyer. Some people will say, well, their lawyer will not be able to do it. But my lawyer does it because I believe in him. And he's demonstrated to me that he's capable of walking with me for the rest of my life. He's brought me this far, and I've done some hideous, bad stuff in my life, even after I gotten saved. There's some bad stuff that he's forgiven me of, that I would think, how can he forgive me? I am feeling so bad. I remember those bad feelings, but yet he'd clean it up for me.
This is my slight problem with this. A lot of people like to look forward to heaven afterwards, but shouldn't we be focused on making heaven on earth? By making it a paradise?
That's why it says these things right unto you that you sin not. God don't want us to do anything wrong. That's our game. That's our aim. That's our goal. But if we do fall short, we got to be conscious of it and do what God says, which is to confess it in order to have it cleansed. So he goes on, afflicted, mourn, and weep. It says, let your laughter be turned to mourning. Okay, so that's a deliberate choice on my part, that I've got to take my arrogance, my complacency, my dull sense of not wanting to feel anything. I got to take my laughter, I got to turn it to mourning. My joy, I got to turn it to heaviness. And then again, after I do that, it says, humble yourself. Humble yourself. Humble yourself. If it means getting down on your knees, get down on your knees. If it means laying flat out on the ground, do that. Whatever you got to do, quit laughing. Quit acting so arrogant, and mourn and humble yourself in the sight of God. And it says, and he shall lift you up. In other words, if you follow this prescription, you'll walk out of the ER a healed man. No symptoms. You're feeling on top of your game. You're feeling cured. You're feeling whole. And I remember last year I was so sick as a dog. I was sick for over a week. I was so sick. I was so desperate. I couldn't even. In fact, it was 2 years ago. I was living in the office here. I was so sick, I couldn't make it. I was going to walk down to the ER, and I couldn't make it. I was so sick. I got down there another way. I went in there, and I remember sitting back in the room, and I'm like, oh, I wish the doctor would come in. I'm so sick. I was so sick sitting in that ER room in the back. I'm like, just give me something, man. I was so sick. But after a day or two, I was feeling great. I was like, wow, I wonder what I had gotten that week. It was like severe flu or something. It was like a lot of stuff all together.
Only 4 people went to the ER, been on the night, everybody got,
Yeah, I think you were here that time.
yeah, bad. It was really bad.
But you know, when you walk out of God's doctor office and you do these prescriptions, it says he'll lift you up. You'll be cured. You'll be whole. You'll have peace. You'll have joy. You'll have a close fellowship and relationship that is endearing to him. This is a great prescription occasionally to read and say, okay, I'm going to evaluate my life. Am I doing this? When was the last time I took this prescription? Have I ever taken it? Maybe I need to do it today. Maybe I need to later go and just do this prescription. Okay, let me just follow these steps in my room here. Get down on my knees, have a talk out with God, humble myself, and then just sit here for a while and let God raise me up. Just follow that technique. Whether you want to do it or not, just follow it. If you're going through the motions, go through it. Follow the technique. Follow this prescription, because it does bring healing. And God has promised that if we follow it, he's going to intervene and he's going to lift us up. And I'd rather have God lift me up than me try to lift myself up. So a lot of people run around trying to lift themselves up. I'd rather have God lift me up. Okay, someone want to close this out?